Sure, thanks Christian. Again, I'm Brantley Tyndall. I'm the director of Towns RVA at Sportsbackers. I've been the lead advocate for the Fall Line Trail since before it had a name in 2017. And in my day job, I sort of coordinate and grow the advocacy movement for biking and walking and active transportation in the Richmond region. And as much as possible, I don't want it to just be like the Brantley show. It's really about growing a really strong and effective grassroots community that is advocating for themselves. And so our primary program is called the Bike Walk RVA Academy, where we train 20 people a year in 5 to 8 week program to learn about how government administration works, how transportation funding and design works, how to lead a neighborhood organizing team, where the funding comes from, and how to make change. So far we've had 220 people go through our program, and they really are the foundation for any active transportation development you've seen in the Richmond region for the past 10 years, because they show up to meetings, they're really articulate, they know how to organize themselves, and they've been the reason why Richmond in 2014, Chesterfield in 2015, Henrico in 2016, and Hanover in 2017 each passed some form of a bike plan. Those were some big fights, particularly Chesterfield and Hanover, where we had to beat the Tea Party, and really an institutionalized opposition to basically anything. And once that was completed, and I say that like that was 5 years of my life, but that took some time. Once that was possible, my team and I were able to basically draw the longest line we could from Ashland to the southern border of Chesterfield, which and the southern portion is a converted railway, so we said, well, why don't we keep going a little farther? So we took it into Petersburg, and we created the original concept for the Fall Line, then called the Ashland to Petersburg Trail. 7 localities, 43 miles, 2 planning districts, and we got letters of support from all 7 localities to say, hey, can we work on this? This was 2019. They probably thought we didn't have much chance to be successful, but they said yes. We went to VDOT in 2019, got a study, got a corridor alignment in 2020, and since then we've raised $280 million to build the trail, and we're about to have a groundbreaking in Richmond on Wednesday to now have 4 localities of the 7 with an active transportation project or an active development project for this trail. It's got a lot of momentum. It promises a lot of great things. It's a signature biking and walking project. It's not like a kind of stuck in some other kind of project like a lot of bike lanes might seem to be. They just kind of move lines on the road and hope that this ends up being a great project. I'm not being critical here. I think a lot of our bike lanes are great. Wish we could build them a little faster. But this project is much more about taking all the successes of the Virginia Capitol Trail, which is 1 million people use it a year. It's basically perfectly safe, as much as you can make anything perfectly safe in this regard. But instead of making it primarily rural, actually connecting people where they live, where they go to work, where they play, crosses 3 rivers, existing and new economic development opportunities. That's the real vision, is people are actually going to use it instead of it being kind of a weekend afternoon kind of recreational amenity. We hired a private firm to do some both analysis and also to develop our Fall Line Vision Plan, which is basically a placemaking plan. You can find it on our website, falllinetrail.org, also falllineva.org. It's a pretty robust menu, essentially, of what we think could be a great list of places and developments along the trail that highlight the different localities. So Hanover doesn't have to look like Richmond, doesn't have to look like Colonial Heights, and really they shouldn't. Like, there should be a lot of variety, and we should let our localities take the lead on their own kind of personality. And it means that if you're a trail user, you have a reason to go outside of your normal neighborhood and see something new. So that was released earlier this year, so we have a lot. We're at the beginning of that story. I don't work for any of our governments, local or state or any. I work with them. So the role that we play as a nonprofit is boosting and helping to coordinate the fundraising that is required for building the trail. But also, we can raise private money. We can do our own private work to implement placemaking along the way. So parks, connections to schools, new art installations, new landscaping. A big one that comes up a lot is Heat Island, and how the development of the Fall Line, particularly in South Richmond, is going to be an opportunity for planting new trees. And Route 1 and Commerce Road, Belmead, where there is essentially no tree canopy. And the subject that I was invited to talk about today is development at Southside, and how it's my sort of best guess as a partially trained urban planner that development pressure in Manchester is going to continue to head south along Commerce Road and Route 1, and it's not going to look the same in 10 or 15 years. And the best opportunity for things like affordable housing and mixed-use housing development, and the flavor that I'm most interested in, I call trail-oriented development. So it's sort of dense development that has its front door, and that could look a lot of different ways, to the trail instead of to the parking lot. And the parking lot is in the back of a parcel, and in often cases probably arguably smaller as well. It's lessons that we've learned from Indianapolis and Atlanta and New York City and places that have really signature trails that accommodate a lot of people. They're going to bring development pressure, and that's going to scare some people. That there's like displacement, or what we might call gentrification, which is I think not the proper term, but displacement of through land value increases and development pressure. Things are this is going to it's happening in cities around the country. You're watching it happen in some places in Richmond. We could find ourselves 10 years from now thinking that the fall line is a boogeyman, but really I'd like to encourage people to think of it as an opportunity for creating the community that we want to have, particularly in Southside, which on Route 1 and Commerce Road, there's not much residential. Like, it's an opportunity for new residential that doesn't exist now. It's a lot of low intensity use, like vehicle storage, cold storage, and light industrial type stuff. With a great view of downtown and a great view of the river. So I guess I'm here as Strongtown, your urbanist or like quasi-urbanist advocates, like thinking about what that part of the city is going to look like with this driver of active transportation and quality of life, and what we can do to ensure that it doesn't get out from under us and just become kind of status quo development that is uninteresting and doesn't achieve a lot of our affordability and accessibility goals. And ultimately, like, I don't want the fall line to become an exclusive nicety for people, but actually like ingrained in the community, that why people live in a place and to get to school and grocery stores, that sort of thing. And so I'm not an authority on this. I'm sort of I recognize that I'm an opportunity to meet a lot of people that have expertise in certain areas, and affordable housing, land trust type action, I think, is probably ripe in the next couple of years, if not before that, particularly on Route 1. There are a lot of parcels that I think, if they aren't picked up pretty soon, are going to be picked up by developers. And the thing, I know enough about development to know they're smarter than a lot of us, and they've got the numbers, they have the data, they know how to analyze this stuff. It's difficult to outgame them. So the best thing that you can do is try to think about the big movement of things and anticipating the place where you want to go before it's enticing to them. So I'm sort of at the end of my expertise on that, and I think probably it's about as much time as you wanted me to orate, but I'm happy to take some questions. I'm sure there's a lot about the Fallen that I have not talked about. It's like my life's work right now. But I'm happy to talk about the Fallen in general, or what we think about the Southside and it's sort of the pros and cons of what's kind of on the horizon. Yes, ma'am.
What do you work out about Bryant Park?
The trail, as currently planned, and there's a groundbreaking on Wednesday, is to pave a new trail through Bryant Park. It's 0.8 miles. There are 3 or so people in the community who are not related to the Friends of Bryant Park who have gone to the media and gotten outsized attention for their claim that there should be no pavement in Bryant Park. But unlikely that's going to be the case. A new trail is basically, it'd be a terrible scenario if we build 43 miles and the worst section is in the easiest place to build a trail in Bryant Park. It's a place that is in dire need of ADA access and pedestrian dedicated space, in a place where it's very busy around soccer, it's very busy around the big market, and part of the park is closed every week for bike racing. And so what are you supposed to do in that scenario? So there's a lot of consensus and good design around building the new trail, but there's a lot of smoke in the air that we're trying to clear, and I think it'll be cleared a lot by Wednesday.
How wide is the trail?
So that's a great question. Now I'll give you a complicated answer for a very simple question. How wide is the trail? We're using the Virginia Capitol Trail as a model, which is 10 feet wide in most cases. The older sections can be 8 in the rural areas. We've gotten our VDOT in our region, all 7 localities, to agree that the minimum standard should be 10, and we're going to see 12 in a lot of places. And by 12, I mean the actual asphalt paved part of it. Some sections will have 1 to 2 feet of gravel buffer on each side. That's just a best practice for the keeping it maintained and drained well. And a lot of like mountain bikers and runners will also appreciate using that, and it helps keep some of the foliage and stuff from growing too closely. There are some sections where my job is to push for good quality, and so there are some sections that are going to be very popular, and I would like for them to be wider early on. Like let's just get it right the first time instead of having to come back and retrofit. Some sections of the Beltline in Atlanta are upwards of 20 feet because it's just a throng of people like multiple times a day. So this is a bit of an aside. Sometimes in the rural area, you'll find people will fight your project because they think, oh, it's going to bring in riffraff, it's going to bring in drug dealers, people are going to steal my TV. By the way, I've never seen a documented case of a TV being stolen on a bike ever. And if you're worried about that thing, wait till you find out about roads. But they're just scared of change, and the actual academic research that I've done, or the sort of research I've tried to find, suggests if you're actually worried about safety, it's user conflicts that you actually have to worry about. Bike riders hitting bike riders hitting strollers, etc. So width is the solution to all of that. But we have both state government and all 7 localities are committed to 10 feet or more for the whole thing.
Yeah. Where has it been hardest to like get the ground running at construction in the fall line?
That is a great question. We're at the beginning of our story, so it's been sort of on paper for 3 or 4 years. It just really broke ground in earnest in October, and an relatively easy section. So the section in Lakeside behind the old Bank of America building, a third of a mile on county-owned property is kind of easy to do. The northern 5 miles, we broke ground in April. That's from the Ashland all the way across the Chickahominy, so all of Ashland, all of Hanover, a little bit of Henrico. That's all being done in one phase, and it should be done next year. So we haven't really hit any roadblocks yet. I will say from a construction standpoint, VDOT underscoped the southern 10 miles. It's all being done in one 10-mile section. It's called design build. What it means is it's an efficient way to administer the project. It means that VDOT can hire one partnership, a designer and the builder, and it requires less back and forth between VDOT and the contractors. They won't be able to do that through like downtown Richmond because it's too complicated. But for the easy sections, like engineering-wise, they can do a big chunk at once. That's what they're doing for the northern section as well. They just didn't ask CSX if they needed to build a bridge over a railroad line. They thought they'd be able to cross that grade, and then CSX came back and said, "Oh yeah, we're going to make you build a bridge over this." And it's like, "Oh, that's $30 million we didn't really think about." So that's just kind of part and parcel for transportation planning. It's hard. It's very difficult to plan a 43-mile trail and not get everything right at the first blush. And they probably had a handshake agreement with CSX at one time that was 5 years old, and then they got called on it later down the line. So kind of stinks. I hate to sort of say, oh, now we have to go get $30 million more, but it is what it is, and it's moving forward. Sure.
About a grocery store in Southside, do you see that as a potential?
So I've been on the periphery of grocery store development a little. Sportsbackers, who is my parent company, has been supported by UCrops since the beginning, and we've had like really good insight on the economics of grocery stores from basically the Richmond market leader for 30 years. And then we were a low-key kind of supporter partner of the market at 25th in the East End. Really, like, I'm not claiming any special credit for that, but in that time, I've learned that the economics of grocery stores are very difficult, right? And you hear that a lot. If you look into the stuff, it's how many people can access it, our margins are very low, how do you size it right? And I think the recipe for a grocery store on Southside, one, is beyond my expertise, but if we're talking about how it might relate to the fall line, you need more people there. And so I sort of see the fall line as creating a partial solution for what's a much bigger picture, which is you need the density of people who can walk and bike in an area to make that sort of thing more feasible. And I go to cities around the country, and they have neighborhood markets that are like really effective grocery stores. They don't have to be a supermarket. You can get most of the things that you need there. And the things that you don't, you make your special chips every once in a while, right? Like, that's not how Richmonders, I think, tend to want to go to the grocery store. They want load their SUV up with stuff like in once a month or something. But I think we can be part of the solution. And I think that's the best that I can get there. All right.
Yeah,
Sure.
unrelated, sort of related, I guess. Mayo Bridge is getting rebuilt. I haven't kept track of that, but there's been any input on that.
So we had a big meeting with 7 or 8 partner organizations back in May. And that was right when days after we learned that the pylons were going to have to be removed and the scope of the replacement of the Mayo Bridge is going to double. And got a lot of people talking about livability. So if we're going to build a $200 million bridge, and I made that number up, so don't quote me on that one. But it's pretty realistic. It's a realistic ballpark. If we're going to, it's a once in a lifetime replacement of a bridge, and we have to make sure that we're not preventing people from biking and walking over it effectively for the next 100 years. So we are growing our coalition sort of slowly, but the next step, I just learned this week that there's a citizen information meeting later this month that we're going to help publicize. Not later this month, in September. I think it's the 16th, but we'll make sure you know about it. And we are expecting to see 3 different designs that VDOT and the city have put together, one of which has a road diet on it. So I don't want to get out front of my skis and telling you any of the details because I'm sure I'll get something wrong. But in a couple of weeks, you're going to see something more. And generally speaking, what we have learned is that we don't expect to see the actual replacement, like the construction, for 3 years. And we know that they are evaluating one set of options that may allow the bridge itself to only be closed for less than a year, which is basically building a new bridge next to the current bridge and then using that current bridge in the operations of building the new one so that they can get the new one operational before they take the old one out. That doesn't necessarily mean anything about what that new bridge is going to look like other than it's not in the exact same footprint. So the other big constraint is the width of the openings of the flood wall. I do know they're not trying to change that. So there are some constraints. From a fall line standpoint, it is actually somewhat related. If you go to the website, our website, or the Plain RVA website, the city's website, there is a line on a map for how the fall line will go through downtown. But truly, you won't know, particularly downtown where the grid, you could basically pick any number of streets to get through downtown. We won't really know the alignment there until the city has funding to pay engineers to evaluate options. It just takes time to figure out where the utilities are. It just isn't simple. It's not a cynical thing. It's just not simple. Yeah, you have to evaluate how much it's going to cost per block based on curb widths and sidewalk widths and where the utilities are, what other projects are in the pipeline. It just takes a lot of time to do that. And so I would just say take that with a grain of salt and from Jackson Ward to the river. And then we don't know exactly how it's going to connect to the Virginia Capitol Trail. We know it's going to, I would bet everything that it's going to connect well to the Virginia Capitol Trail. But do we use the Canal Walk? Do we use Bird Street? Do we use Mayo Bridge? And I'm starting to kind of angle my advocacy towards the Mayo Bridge. One, because I think it'll help the Mayo Bridge in the long term, but because Hull Street really has the opportunity to be like a Main Street kind of destination. It's made some great strides. It's just not quite there yet. And having that be the main connector between the Fall Line corridor and the Virginia Capitol Trail does a lot of great things from a tourism and recreation standpoint and a local business standpoint on Hull Street and in that corridor. So there's a lot to be determined between now and then, but there's a fair amount of support in the city in that concept.
I have another question. So this past Saturday, I was biking.
That's a great question. We do a lot of community engagement. We have for a long time. But the best way to measure it is usually in public hearings, public surveys, that kind of thing. And so where there has been the most support in a quantifiable way has been in Richmond Connects, where there were, and I just saw this today, so these are in the remarks for the administration for the groundbreaking on Wednesday for the Fall Line. But there were 20,000 or so comments about in Richmond Connects, which is Richmond's multimodal transportation plan that had a dedicated path to equity focus, like how they wanted to focus their transportation planning was about equity and in particular investing in places that haven't been invested in a long time. So South Richmond is a great example. And they were overwhelmingly positive. I think the percentage is 75% positive of the Fall Line Trail. And they did very, very targeted focusing. And we worked on with the Office of Equitable Transportation and Mobility throughout the summer, I think of 21, when they were doing a lot of this engagement in Southside community centers and parks in order to really connect with communities that maybe don't really talk about this very much. And we similarly partner as often as we can with Groundwork RVA, Southside Relief, and other local nonprofits that really have a good ground game there. And I was on the board of Groundwork RVA in 2012, and one of the main focuses in their initial strategic plan was create an active transportation connection from Belmead Community Center and Oak Grove Elementary to and across the river. And this is going to be basically that thing. It's just taken 15 years to do it. So we have some organizational support, we have some neighbor support. Community engagement is tricky though, because you will always have someone come out of the woodwork and say, I haven't heard this, I don't like it. And so you kind of have to have mature expectations about what community conversations can be like, even if you have mixed opinions about things. So I think we're doing a good job and we have a lot of support.
Yes, thank you everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you for coming out in the rain. It was like the Atlantic out there, so I'm excited we made it. Some of us made it just in time, so we haven't really gotten drenched. So I'm Maurice Neblett. I'm running to serve as Richmond's next mayor in the city of Richmond. I'm 35 years old. I'm energetic. I'm ready for the changes that we need for our city. I bring new ideas to old problems. We have candidates that I'm running against that have had opportunity to resolve issues in our community and that hadn't been done. So I'm the only candidate that looks to make sure that we make effective change day one, once elected with your vote. I graduated from Virginia Union University. I'm the first generation graduate there. I'm also a business owner, entrepreneur. So some of the businesses I do have is in security firm, roadside assistance. So I do understand the importance of road and road safety. Also, we grassroots in healthcare and then also in freight. But I more so do consulting work. The main thing I do on a daily basis is community work. So I'm a community organizer, community visionary, and also I am a resource manager. So I don't work population specific, when it comes to issues in our community. If there's a call, I have to answer. I want to make sure we come with resolution. A lot of times we have issues in our community that doesn't take rocket science, but it takes just a little support. It just takes another ear or hands of helping process, right? So with that, I come with a fresh perspective. I come with a perspective of community, with understanding the challenges that we face. I lived all over the city of Richmond. I lived north, east, south, and west. So when it comes to the issues here, like in the West End, I know those issues, and they're not less important than any other issues that we have in the city. We just have to address them. We have to prioritize, and we just really have to get it done. We have to have more involvement, which we have the help. Individuals are in the mud. Like your organization, we are in the mud. So we just need to have a seat at the table. And that's one thing I'll make sure that we have is a seat at the table with this local governance coming up with this administration for 2025 fiscal. So when we look at the issues in our community, like the safety roadway issues, for one, we need to make sure we have all the roads that's needed. We need to make sure we don't just fill it with potholes. I don't want to be the pothole mayor. I want to be the mayor that makes sure we pave the roads where they're needed. I want to make sure that we have the speed bumps in the neighborhoods that's highly populated with our children. I want to make sure that we also have the traffic circle infrastructure in place where we have influx of traffic. And I know coming down Idlewood, a lot of people fly through that stop sign because they think they just tunnel vision and they're looking to get on the highway. So that's an issue there. But I want to make sure we have innovative techniques. We need to have curbside lighting and reflectors. We need to make sure that our city is well lit. Some parts of our city, you turn and you're not sure if you're going to roll over the median or if you're going to drive into the curb, because you can't differentiate between the parking lot entrance and the curbs, because it's just dark. Another thing is also the grass. We have some areas in Richmond, and since we spoke on Southside, Hall Street and Warwick, that traffic circle. I mean, you would think we're in Australia or Africa somewhere, the way the grass is so high. I mean, you can't even see some of the signs in some areas. So that's not good safety roadway practices. So I want to make sure we make a lot of improvements. We make sure the city is beautiful along the way with that, but making sure we have visibility, right? Visibility with lighting, visibility with not having any obstructions, but then also making sure that we have potholeless roads. I mean, I've had a fair share in college. I went through axles and ball joints, and even wheels and rims, because I rode over areas where it's just bad, right? This city can do better with potholes. Okay. All right. So another thing is with our administration, what I look to make sure we have in place is opportunity for our citizens to have a vote. I believe that we do need to place issues on the ballot or concerns on the ballot, no question. It's nothing for us to staff for that. We actually have them staffed throughout the year, just to make sure that's clear, at our registrars and the other localities, like the City Hall, where we utilize that as a polling station along with the registrars. I believe we can have a collective community formation. That's key. A lot of individuals, they bring up like police reform, right? I just don't believe we can have that without having a community formed. We need to make sure that we have a seat and make sure we have a voice and make sure we have involvement when it comes to our community and our community policing. So I have a background in criminology and criminal justice. So I bring a unique dynamic, with me in coming into this election. For one, our nation needs to be more secure, let alone our city. So when we're looking at security, we're looking at our cyber world, right? We're looking at our safety and defense responses when it comes to our militia. I know a lot of times we don't think about it. We may have forgotten, but we do have Virginia or Richmond defense organizations. But situations like the pandemic, when we had the riots, and those. I'm trying to find the best way to say it, but we had situations where some individuals were acting unruly, and they weren't, advocating for the issue. They were utilizing that as a time for destruction. That's a wake-up call, for me, to make sure that we have a safe neighborhood and safe streets, because, we think about, if any of you seen the movie, it's at the tip of my brain. The movie when they went and they sanctioned killing, right? And I'm sorry to use this, purge. It reminds me of opportunity for a purge, right? We need to make sure we have secure, tactics in place to just dissolve and de-escalate, and almost instantaneous, and not just shooting tear gas at the crowd, not anything like that. We have to be proactive, and being proactive is really, honing in on community engagement. With me living all over the city of Richmond, I believe I have contacts in communities where other candidates, they do not. I go in certain neighborhoods, even my team, they say, hold on, we're not going with you, because I understand, the dynamic of that community, it may be, seen as a safety risk because of some behaviors of individuals there. But I go in those communities because that's where we need to be facing it head on. I wanted to stare it in the face, because we can't allow at any point throughout in our society for any disruptive and really criminalization in our society, because it runs from one neighborhood to the next. And a lot of times we believe that we may be in a safe zone, right? But I see where they spews over from one neighborhood to the other. So when we go attacking this type of dynamic is facing that small population directly, we have to target those individuals to let them know, hey, I know what's going on. I know what you're doing. We know, we have information to believe that you have firearms and you may be utilizing that, in a manner that is not conducive for the growth of our citizens, right? And, and provide it as an intervention moment, right? To say, how can we help you, right? I'm all about self-sustainability. That's another way that's going to protect us, right? As far as the security standpoint. If we're self-sustainable, no matter what happens in any other state, we should be able to outlast, as much as possible through a certain period of time. I have a projection, but that's going to determine on our businesses the way they thrive, right? That's going to determine the development that we have in our community, and limiting the outside source for development. We need to keep the financials within the city longer, right? That's what's going to make Richmond the Dubai of Virginia. I want to make sure that we are the strongest economically on the East Coast. We can do it. We have a lot of infrastructure that we can build upon. The thing is, though, we have a lot of buildings and businesses on Hall Street, right? We need to attract more businesses and on the Hall Street area, and then also on Broad Street, right? We need to make it more an incentive for those local businesses, and limit the incentives to the big developers. I know we incentivize them 7-year tax break. The issue is that we already have a high number of exemptions, and maybe from $40 to $100 million exemption loss. I call it a loss because we're not gaining any revenue on it. That's something that we need to limit. But when it comes to our local businesses, we need to encourage them. We need to be able to give more support. Provide business resource centers attached with City Hall. But speaking on City Hall, I want to make sure that we clean up the cesspool in City Hall. A lot of times individuals, they talk about revenue. Even the politicians that are running against, they speak on revenue, but as a business owner, profits aren't profits if we're taking losses, right? So when we're looking at revenue, it's not true revenue, because if money is being spent or taken, right, or the misuse of funds are happening, we're the ones taking the loss, overall. So I want to ensure that we have a forensic audit, in our City Hall, so that we can make sure that we don't have these same issues again, because it's unfortunate. As you mentioned, even with the trails, there's a number attached to it, and we're in the millions, right? When we need infrastructure changes or anything in our community, we always hear we don't have the money. That's a fragment, though. That's a fragment, because next thing you know, we have funds for something else, right? We can't even get funding for a curb. Like I know as a family, their elderly grandmother fell over because she's on a wheelchair, and there wasn't a handicap ramp there, right? And the city told them either they have to pay to have it installed, but they don't have the money right now. I mean, something that's as small as a 4 foot in width and 2 foot in height, or in same stance, you can't even accommodate for that. That just shows the issues that can arise when it comes to the needs for our community. That's just a small prerequisite of issues, and that's just a reflection of where we are. We really have our issues, and our issues right now is in transparency. Why do we not have the money? That's one of the main things I want to make sure we provide the community, is the transparent aspect, and also being accountable. Where we don't have the money, where did the money go? You right? Because we keep continuing to have the issues in our community and deaths. Right? We just had recently a stabbing that was at the bus stop. Right? We also had the issue with the FedEx truck hitting a woman. Right? So these are safety issues that could be prevented with some funding, right? With some funding, with more lighting, more curbside reflectors, and also with the stabbings, right? We need some cameras in areas, and I know we have to always look at safety versus liberty, right? And we don't really want to infringe on any freedoms, right, or rights, but no one should be at a public station and they're being victimized. let alone being victimized outside of City Hall. Like not too long ago, it was a shooting right outside of City Hall. That shows how much our city is out of control, and we've lost that grip. So I want to make sure we have that grip back. I have a close connection with the community, so I'm willing to go out on the forefront of it, right? I want to make sure we have communication and education on what it means for a mayor to stand on business. And when I say standing on business is being responsible for the safety, security, being responsible for the resources that we need in our community and our schools. And I think that, with a vote, your vote for Neblett is a vote towards the future. I believe your vote for Neblett is a vote for a new way forward. And I believe your vote for Neblett is a vote for your voice. It's so many smart and talented individuals out in our community. I know you mentioned, like, we have some developers, they work with the numbers, they are great, but we have some here. And I believe you are an emulate of one of those individuals that can help, shine a light and help pave the way, Well, you're not a developer. No. You're not a developer, but with having the knowledge, right? To knowing that when you have a negation and something that antagonizes against what you're looking to do, you work it the opposite way, right? We know without tallying the numbers, without saying like, hey, we need 10 more rooftops, in the Southside area to have a grocery store. That's not anything that should make the determination. People are hungry. We know we need it. We just need to make it happen. Elwood Thompson is a great example. I love Elwood Thompson. If you haven't been, please visit. That's a great size store. I mean, we at least need something like that on that side of town and minimize and reduce, really cease the establishment of more vape shops. I'm trying to find the best way of saying it because I'm a business owner and I understand, but we have enough of those, okay? In place of where those vape shops are, we could have had small versions of grocery stores or convenience stores that have healthy foods and healthy supermarket, right? So it changed the dynamic at this time. The paradigm has to come back to the reality. We know what we want, we know what we need, and let's talk about it. Let's build it together. I mean, that's a simple form for me. It's just complex issues with simple solutions. I believe that that's going to be the effective way for our next administration. But I love to answer any questions. And then please excuse me, I went from one meeting to the next. I mean, I don't even know how many meetings, like 4 meetings today. So I may have skipped some of what I wanted to cover. But I do want to answer any questions or concerns that you do have in regards to our city and our administration coming up for this election. Yes, sir.
So what's your plans to do with the shortage of new housing being built in the city? Do you have any steps you want to take to address that?
So first, what we have, even in Southside, we have a lot of vacant homes, right? What I want to say is that we need to invest in the properties and estates here. Pawning it off to developers, I don't think that's a great choice because we need to develop affordable home ownership, right? With the hike of the unaffordable housing market, we need to be able to control the dynamic and how that fits for Richmond. At this stage, we have a lot of apartments that are built around the city, and there are more, right? Average rent for a 2-bedroom is $1,550. You have some of the new units that are being built for a 1-bedroom is around $1,600. So taking what we have, right, and making sure that we do the right thing with that first before ignoring it and building new homes. That's the approach that I want to take. But of course, I'm a man of referendum. So that's something that I'll place on the table for us to make a decision. Are we going to revitalize these homes here so we can develop and have affordable home ownership? Or will we build more affordable housing, which is a bit unaffordable? But we need to look at the lower income and minority groups that need housing that will fit within the range of no more than 35% of your income. That's an approach that I look at for anyone, no matter where you are. I don't believe you should have to pay more than 35% of your income. I mean, even at 80,000, you know, feeling at 80,000, making more than 80,000 a year. I mean, I feel it. I feel it. You know, it is like a draining pot right now. The way our economy is not equating the wage, right? The pay is not just, it's just not fitting. The meals tax, we'll touch on that, but grocery store and foods are high. You know, we have gas and hiked back up, you know, to $3.40, some at 60 cents. You know, we have also the aspect of entertainment. I don't know how, just the pricing has just changed. It's hard to really have a good time. And we really need that. After having a hard day's work throughout the week, we need to have a reset, you know. I think that dynamic for housing, we just have to take an inside out approach and not just pacify it by just saying affordable housing. That term to me is a deflection. That term to me is deceitful. And I believe we have to draw back and redefine it.
Well, our group's big on supply increases, big time.
Yes.
And if you had a chance to read the book that Chuck wrote, who started Strong Towns, it might change your mind a little bit, because what will help most for most people is we need more housing. Like trying to determine all this stuff, like the gentleman was just speaking about the Fall Line Trail. It's like a 15-year project. So Christian's son's going to be going off to college. Son? Yep. Son. 50-50 chance of that. Son's going to go off to college. You know, if we try to do a project of that length, like that's an unacceptable length of time. And so I think that you could distinguish yourself if you consider some of these supply-oriented alternatives, because they're way faster to implement than going through 8 years worth of planning to then build one building that ends up not working out financially. Like especially with what Strong Towns talks about with a lot of infill. So instead of these big buildings, it's more about, they call it accessory dwelling units, but just additional units on already zoned single-family properties. We can get a lot of groundswell supply very quickly. And that's mostly the problems of the blockers that mostly relate to regulation and zoning and not requiring more government expenditure. And that could really help you achieve your goals without having to, you know, try to knock down everybody at City Hall to raise money to get it done. Like, you could definitely distinguish yourself, especially on a group like us, who's pretty motivated around increasing the supply of housing, which inherently will push the prices down. Like,
Right.
if you're advocating within a group like us and trying to figure out what's going to speak to people like us, it's that language.
Right.
Because we don't have time to wait. You know, Christian's son's going off to college used to be like, oh man, I can spend 35%. Like that's way too much. It's now 20 because Richmond's developing like Austin is, or like Nashville is, and that's been all driven by reforms on their ease of constructing housing, making it easier for people to develop versus top down. Let's pick a place and figure out how to get everybody involved. So let people develop what they want to make. So could be helpful for you.
Right. Well, you know, even though you making that statement, I'm definitely with progress. I'm for that. I'm for a change. But it does take. See, it's always been from a bottom up approach, and that hasn't been effective for Richmond. It's from top down. You know, that's where it comes with accountability. That's what comes us having to make sure to say, hey, we looking at the plans, but we know these are the revenue challenges we're facing. Now, no one wants to admit that, you know, where the revenue challenges are, and they also don't want to admit where the interest of the developer and the corporate is outweighing the people's voice. So when it comes to the dynamic of housing, I first want to make sure that we utilize what we have, because when I say we develop affordable home owners, we essentially are developing taxpayers, right? We need to make sure that we pull up, you know, these other communities that we're breaking down. We're breaking down Hillside, Creighton Court. We're breaking down Gilpin Court. There's an $11 million project for Gilpin Court. But a lot of issues what we're having now is that they're receiving vouchers. When we have a family and as a community organizer, I'm battling with, there's a family with a voucher for $2,000. So the city is paying, the curbing that the expense for the housing, but there's no housing that they're being accepted to, right? So instead of us always, pushing out for a voucher that we're not really housing, people are becoming displaced, right? So we need 5,000 units to cover the displaced individuals, and I really feel like 5,000 is an understatement. I don't think that's a hard 5,000, but we need at least 5,000 units, which we can build high on to really, resolve the homelessness in Richmond before we turn into Skid Row. We're so close to it, and the crime level is going to go high. So I look at it as in layers. As far as utilizing what we have, get individuals that are ready for homes. I graduated college. When they changed in 2011, the legislature said you have to utilize your debt to income ratio with your student loans. That puts us at a halt as individuals graduating from college. We can't just go and purchase a home, even though we may be working professionals. But if we're not making over, maybe $80,000 to $100,000, we wouldn't be able to offset that to obtain a home. So we have individuals that graduate from VCU, or University of Richmond, and we want to hold on to the individuals in the city of Richmond, right? So that's why I look at, let's see how we can hold on to what we have, those vacant homes. Let us invest, let the people invest into that so that we can develop home ownership. But then also, we're not ignoring the fact we need to build apartments. We need to, but at what expense will it be if more individuals will become homeless and we have more vagrants on the street? That's going to put a stain on business. People wouldn't want to cross the street. I'm just looking at ahead on the forefront. But as I mentioned, it still is going to be the people's decision. My job isn't to make that decision for you, even though it has seemed to have been that way for 4, 8, or 12 years. Now it's for us to make that decision. It's for the people to vote on what priority that you want to say. And the only thing I have to do is make sure I support that and I advocate and make sure the policies are proper, so we can make sure the regulations are in place. So that's my position. I don't come in here with the ego, into this politics. I don't come in here with having to make a decision for the people. I have ideas. I've lived it. I've seen it. I'm 35. I've lived in Richmond most of my life. And even the offset of me being in foster care, seeing a dynamic where we need support in social services for the youth and for the elderly. It's so many dynamics we need to focus on, where I don't believe that the decision from Maurice Neblett is going to, stop us from being able to progress as a city, and especially when it comes to establishing a state, for our residents. So that's something that we want to make a decision on the box.
Okay.
Yes, sir. But if you have a question, please ask me specifically. Yes.
Like in terms of transportation, is there is there specific projects you want to prioritize in, or or maybe transportation modality, or just projects you want to prioritize in for the city?
Well, for one, I'm not sure if any of you have traveled to DC, the DC area. We supposed to have a bus transfer station. That is not a bus transfer station. That's a parking lot where buses just go. We need to put buses back on Broad Street or at the 501 North 9th Street. That could be a great area for a bus transfer station where we can have television, where we can have restrooms, where we can have some businesses in those places. That's one key thing I wanted to make sure that we affect when it comes to us having a hub for our residents that's utilizing the public transit. So. It's okay. Take your time. Take your time. I can speak on a few things that I may have not covered. So one of the other issues that I want to make sure we do acknowledge, our traffic lights aren't synced. All right, we need to sync our traffic lights. All right, we need to reevaluate that. Also, we need to add more bike lanes. We need to add more bike lanes, and also I plan to increase the funding for those issues. Let's see. Many of the concerns, have been at the beck and call of the citizens for a very long time, but it seemed that they have been silenced. And, the elected officials have ignored, those very people who elected them. My thing about transparency is to make sure we put it all on the table, because we have to control it at the poll. It's not only, I know a lot of times people ask questions and concerns. I hear people all the time say, well, no, that's not city, that's a state. Or it's not state, that's federal. As an elected official, I believe that I have to advocate no matter what level it's on. I have to take that concern and advocate it and make sure that it goes to the right door and we can address it. Wherever the door is open, let's let it be known. But wherever the door is closed, it should be known as well. So that we'll be able to, push through the issues and not just continue to have the same issues and have to wait 50 years for a resolution. Yes, sir.
Meals tax.
Oh, all right, so the meals tax. All right, so as a community organizer, a business came to me because they were threatened that they faced jail time and that they had to pay tens of thousands of dollars if they didn't pay. So this company came to me asking for help, right? So I went, I looked at the evidence, I pulled evidence and made sure I explained it to them. Ultimately, the issue fell on the city, all right? The issue fell on the city with accountability. They told the company that they were dining out only, so they didn't have to pay meals tax, right? That's a problem. We have to have our city hall. That's why I mentioned, making sure our city hall is cleaned up. We have to ensure that our city hall is equipped and knowledgeable about the services that we're providing. But the thing about meals tax, we've gotten it this year, but the whole point of the meals tax was to provide funding to our schools. It hadn't happened. This year it did. This is an election year though. So that $9 to $10 million, is my job with that forensic audit to see where that money has been allocated, because that takes away from our children, that takes away from you being the taxpayers. And meals tax, we need to reevaluate it, because it hadn't been utilized the way it should. And if we truly want to pay meals tax, we need to see where that money is going, and we need to make a decision on, the allotment of those funds as well.
I got it. So I'm not sure, where your stance is regarding Richmond 300 and kind of the revamping of the zoning code, to modernize it from its last creation back to the mid-70s. I'm not sure how you feel about the re-implementation of the zoning code.
So, what I say is everything needs to be reevaluated. It hadn't been done since the 60s. And we have some areas for zoning for towing, right? We have some zoning that hadn't been changed, but there's not a fair practice when it comes to zoning for some businesses. Some businesses have been grandfathered in, and I think that we need to reevaluate it for sure, because we need to have an equitable society. So I feel that we do need to reevaluate for zoning and cut the red tape with permitting, and also make sure we support our businesses when it comes to procurement. That all ties in, because we need to give procurement opportunities to our local government.
No, oh, Fred was going to talk after.
He's welcome to.
That was great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
So my background, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've built and sold businesses in a number of industries, both my own and others, where I'm pretty good at going into a business with $1 to $2 million a year of earnings and scaling it and getting it to the point where basically a lower middle market private equity fund or family office wants to come in and buy it. So I've done kind of that type of entrepreneurial stuff my whole career. I've been across a number of different industries, everything from film to financial services. And in 2022, I decided to move back to Virginia following Executive Order 19, which was published by the Youngkin administration with a real commitment to removing unnecessary regulatory hurdles from the Commonwealth. So the concept that I kind of settled on after about a year and a half of chewing on it was a non-alcoholic third space for a bar-like concept, and so that's how KavaClub was born. I had first been exposed to Kava, heard about it when I played rugby in college, tried it for the first time in 2017, got it off Amazon. That was a mistake because it's hard to prepare. And then in 2022, I had a friend who moved to Florida. He's sober, and I'm on the board of his business, so I go down every few months and spend some time with him. And we'd always end up at Kava bars. And I was like, well, the product isn't great here. The staff training isn't great. There's a lot of opportunities to really do this in a different way and create a third space that is alcohol-free when 38% of the population doesn't drink. And in Virginia, for example, this is the only non-alcoholic bar in the Commonwealth. So researched a lot of what that would look like and realized that, all right, to serve the products, the Kava model is something that works. And to serve those products, how could I do that legally? Or could I do that legally? Because as you mentioned, the vape shops, so the vape shops, an aside, the vape shops are almost every product in those vape shops is illegal. Unfortunately, the Virginia Department of Agriculture and the Virginia Department of Health and Human Resources fails to engage. It's actually, Virginia is the center. I don't know if you know about Kratom. This is kind of ties into the product and why we had challenges. So Kratom is a product that there's an alkaline in it that interacts with your brain chemistry the same way that opiates do. It just doesn't slow down your breathing. So there's a number of businesses, the biggest distributor in the world is based in the Commonwealth, where they basically realize that they can make them stronger and stronger, and you can develop a $3,000 a month physical and psychological addiction. You're a great customer, except you have an addiction that is not, and these are from products that are not legal and shouldn't be, and that's what vape shops are sold. And that's why vape shops have grown so quickly, is because VDAX as an organization is grossly negligent in how they've been managing them. If you go down the street, either way, the legal dispensaries, and they're selling all these products that are, there's no scientific history of use prior to 1958 that shows they're safe, and they haven't gone through what's known as the generally recognized as safe process. And there's tens of thousands of people in Virginia that are addicted to these various products, and unfortunately our public health system is just so inept that there's not a lot that they can do. So that was kind of the background going into the non-alcoholic bar business. I needed to avoid those products that had that were not legal. So did a lot of research, had a specialty law firm in DC do some research, and found a way that we could legally render these products. Should be good to go, right? Nice and easy. Signed a space because I had 3 different law firms assess and give me a legal opinion on the products and how we were rendering them. So lease a space out, getting ready to go through. We had some permitting issues. Our landlord, we had, I don't know what happened. We lost 3 months, and Richmond BizSense scooped our story, and the way they report is, do you want to say anything? We're running a story, so yeah, you always say something. And unfortunately, that reporter took a aggressive and not well-researched position that sensationalized the product, and the Department of Health had a meltdown and reached out immediately and wanted us to submit our application, even though because we didn't have our certificate of occupancy, we were not able to submit that application. But they submitted it, it was immediately denied, hired a lobbyist, Brad Copenhaver, who was the deputy commissioner at VDAX under the Northam administration. VDAX refused to meet with him. He knew the people at the Department of Health. They refused to meet with him. We sent them the legal opinion letters, made the lawyers available to them, asked them to talk with other departments of health that had a better understanding of this, and they continued the process of denying. That started in February of 2023. In April, we had what's called an informal fact-finding meeting. It's part of the Administrative Process Act, and what's supposed to happen is all contrary, basically you're supposed to submit your side. Any contrary information is supposed to be reviewed. There's discovery requirements under that. So we got to that meeting in April of last year, and it was very apparent very quickly that this was just a bad faith exercise, right? That we were not actually here to have this discussion. We had an hour-and-a-half long presentation that we gave them. We had offered to bring in some of the world's leading scientists, like the editorial chair of the Association of Analytical Chemists, who the FDA statutorily relies upon for esoteric botanical knowledge. Nobody wanted to meet with them. This is a legal proceeding. And when we went in there, it was pretty clear that they were just attempting to block us from opening, and that they were relying on information which had not been shared to us, which violated the evidentiary standards of the Administrative Process Act. I brought a court reporter, so it's all word for word, validated in writing, knowing that, you know, the bad faith was already very imminent. At some point, I thought we'd talk to an adult. It became clear after the meeting that there was nobody was going to talk to us. Nobody wanted to talk about the science. The Attorney General's office felt comfortable just simply ignoring the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, also violating the Administrative Process Act. So they refused to acknowledge that there's something called the Delaney Clause, which created the food additive regulations in 1958 existed, because we had shown them the documentation that Kava and Kratom are fine because we have more than 2 documented sources of use prior to 1958, which is what the law calls for. It's a very binary test. And if you follow that all the way down in federal law, it means that any product that meets those requirements is exempt from any food additive regulations, which is why we started on this process and how we chose to render our products. Well, the Attorney General's office said the bureaucrats are not going to move until a circuit court judge forces them to. So after the informal fact-finding committee, where we know what the outcome is, right? It's going to be a no, because we did this hour-and-a-half long presentation, asked for some questions. There weren't questions. We caught them in the lie of, where is this FDA guidance that you claim is germane to your decision-making? They had a privileged discussion for 25 minutes, came in, and essentially got up and walked out, and that was the end. So once we initiated litigation, I hired the early legal group. There was I started a financial services firm in college, and one of the legal interns there, I'd worked with for a long time, and he was with this firm, and hired them to hire the best and brightest Administrative Process Act minds in the state. And they came up with a plan that they recommended that we were going to go follow through on the litigation front. Whiteford Taylor Preston was that firm. It ended up, so we go through this process. They ended up making significant mistakes of both procedure and law. And I had to bring in another firm behind them about 2 months after we engaged them. But I had to wait. We had a court date. If you get a court date, you don't push it off, because the next one is in umpteen months. Because the judicial system in Richmond, a lot of Virginia, and a lot of other states just is not actually accessible to small businesses, entrepreneurs, anything that's not a multinational or with unlimited funding. Went through that court date. It was exactly as expected. They had followed civil litigation procedures instead of Administrative Process Act procedures, and their strategy was also based on, it was not statutorily available relief that the judge could have granted. Replaced them with another law firm. The law firm said, basically, you're f***ed. Like, you can't resuit, because as I was firing them and trying to get this firm to focus and calling the managing partner, it's a big firm, wouldn't talk to me. They continued to make mistakes in the filings and follow the wrong process. And the Attorney General's office had caught on to this, so they just, every single step, made it hard. So I was told, well, good luck. The next court date's in May of this year. So I wasn't going to take that for an answer. So I started going deep into the industry, because to get in the kava industry, you meet some pretty interesting folks. It's a gray area. It's an adjacent gray area industry, right to the vape shop. So there's a lot of bleed over of people that operate in both spaces. And so I ended up going and finding a legislative aid for a congressperson in Hawaii. And her legislative aid was already working with some industry people that we were working with as well. And in October of last year, there was a document submitted to the University of Hawaii, which was their process to give formal guidance that kava tea, as we're proposing, is safe. The FDA also supported that through multiple avenues. And once I was able to get that information, we submitted that to the Commonwealth, and there was a Times Dispatch piece that ran when it came out, and they immediately wanted to settle. We pushed our court date back. Well, little did I know that the goal of talking about settlement was to push the court date back to force me to settle, and we ended up with a 59-page document that restricts our business judgment and our rights in a lot of ways, and oversteps. Also, it ignores recent legislation passed by the legislator. It kind of oversteps the Department of Health and the Youngkin administration to overstep their statutory bounds. And that's where we get into the actual really bad governance part of this, which is we've not been able to, just getting ghosted by everyone in government. It's a very familiar pattern. I think the number 4 person at the Attorney General's office was supposed to be our attaché as of last month. Ask for a meeting in person, say, I'm not going to just get on the phone with you and That was, we met with John Littell, who's the Governor Youngkin's chief of staff. His response was, hey, if you make the bureaucrats look stupid, there's consequences to that. That's just the way it works, and just really, it's been a really shocking experience going through both the executive agency where we've been ghosted and also the legislative branch has just been a very, it's been, if you want to get a meeting with your delegate, just pretend you're a lobbyist. Don't say you're a citizen because they won't talk to you, they won't respond to you. That's been a really, Virginia overall, it's been a really shocking experience because I've operated at the federal level and the state level, both of legislators and executive branches, passed legislation. Not my first rodeo in any respects. And I just never dreamed that in America, I would see or experience something like this. I'm a veteran. I tried to get the Virginia Veteran and Defense Affairs Secretary to engage, refused to meet with me over and over again. I had to start showing up at in-person events to try and get senior administration people to meet with me. There'd be one meeting and then ghosting, right? Not showing up to meetings, all of a sudden not responding to emails, canceling meetings. So it's been and it's just stupid, right? It's a very stupid thing. And the amount of resources, like the Attorney General's office, full legal review that menu. In their opinion, that's legal, and that's where resources are going. And this is a Republican administration whose entire reason for being is the antithesis of this. But what Virginia lacks, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a lack of intestinal fortitude and leadership issue that's just really clear because Governor Cooper's administration in North Carolina, not happening like this. Governor Holcomb in Indiana, not happening like this. Governor Perry in Texas, not happening like this. And that's just all from my actual experience with those administrations. So it's been a wild ride. The worst decision I ever made was to move back to Virginia in 2022. So, because it's just right, because as an entrepreneur, if your ability to earn a living is cut off, and also if it's you should be good, and just knowing you make decisions off of things, and it's just what it is, it's a bad faith, bleed you out. Some of the delegates I've spoken with have been shocked by the intentionality shown by the Youngkin administration, the Attorney General's office, and the Department of Health, but it's really one of those, normally people just take it lying down, right? Oh, okay, you don't like that, but that's not my style. So I pushed as hard as possible. Well, right, it's what the law is. If somebody wants to have a discussion on the law and tell me I'm wrong on the law, great. But if you're going to use the judicial system as a meat cleaver to bash my skull in, right? That's not, and it's not civil litigation, it's Administrative Process Act. So it raises all sorts of questions as well from a bar and a legal perspective with the Attorney General's office, not on my side as well, right? Because, right, if you're going to bill six figures for stuff, you probably should be following the right evidentiary standard, and that's also a bar issue as well. But the structures are not in place to actually have that enforceability and accountability. I'm afraid to go to the bar because then I'm going to get sued, a six-figure lawsuit from this law firm, right? There's nothing, so it's just been a really interesting experience, and it shows how weak the leadership is in the Commonwealth, and also it shows how weak the institutions are as well. So it's just been a jarring experience, and you see it. The first company I started was a brokerage business. So if you know what a 1031 exchange is, we introduced basically correspondent clearing, which is set transaction settlement for smaller developers so that they could trade up and kind of get a lot of transparency to some murkier sides of the real estate industry. And it's the same incompetence and everything on the real estate side as well. It's another, I can only imagine what it's like to be a developer in Virginia after seeing the governmental side on the non-developer side. So it's been an interesting experience that I'm sure leads over into all sorts of stuff, right? You have did you say building, right? There's infrastructure in by the Coliseum, right? But it's not by the Coliseum, raw land for developers to make the VIG on the, complete all the value chain. So what do we get? We get a boulevard that is remember when Richmond didn't have traffic and it was nice, right? And that's, and that's the type of stuff that, you see happening as well, because these weak leadership and weak institutions that are corrupt, right? Because corruption does not involve having gold bars in your closet. You don't have to be Bob Menendez. Corruption, by definition, is an abuse of power for whatever it can be, and that's what I've seen a lot of in Virginia that's just shocking. It's the open corruption, but it's not viewed as corruption because, the thing that I've heard a lot is complexity. People don't want to deal with complexity throughout Virginia. That's why people stop. If it's too complex, that's it. Yeah.
me as a mayor and administrator, I want to hold on to as many businesses in the city as possible and as residents as well. So through all you went through, where do you see that the most help could be for business owners running into issues like that, especially when it comes to having the government?
Somebody to care, right? That's what it takes for somebody to care, right? And that's been my experience over and over again. Just the disrespect, the lack. I've made thousands of unreturned calls and messages. The last time I saw my Delegate Carr's chief of staff, I got dressed down for calling the current mayor and saying, I don't know what this guy's doing, but with constituent services, I can't get a call back, can't get a response, I just get nothing, and that's the type of stuff where it's just nobody cares, right? There's, at least at the state level, the city level, there's nothing they could do, but also nobody in the city was willing to do anything, right? I briefed everybody. Everybody knows I have a briefing book, it's 30 pages long, but it takes intestinal fortitude, right? And it takes being willing to engage in complexity that's outside of the stuff that just comes to you to do every day that makes you feel good like you accomplished something. So I think it's leadership. It's just leadership. And that's, so.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And that's just one of the horrific stories that we have with our business owners having to go through. There's so much bureaucracy. And having to weave through the cliquish, if you don't know someone, you're not going to get it done, type of dynamics. So for an issue, I would look to resolve is to have a business resource center that's attached with City Hall, but also have associated with our chambers, like Chamber RVA and Bridging the Gap. We need to make sure that we have avenues for advocacy. Those chambers are supposed to advocate, especially the Chamber of Commerce, especially when you go to state and federal level. So I do look to make sure we have that connection within our city so that we can avoid that, because we're losing business owners from the city because of the permitting processes, because of the zoning issues that we need to reevaluate. I believe that that's something that we need to work on within the first 100 days of me being elected. For being elected mayor, and I do, like I said, I commend you. Thank you for sticking with it, and you have a wealth of experience that can help a new entrepreneur, and also can help a business owner that comes to the city. And we need to have that networking, that mentoring, because I'm a serial entrepreneur as well, and I understand where we had some hurdles we had to jump, especially when it comes to the city and my mental health side. I do have some healthcare and the mental health business as well, but I do look to be that representation for the housing and residential issues. I do look to be the representation for the business issues, for our family concerns, for our community adjustments and concerns we have for our street and road safety, and the safe streets, right? I want to make sure that we collectively make decisions and prioritize what's going to be needed in each district, but then we have an ultimate citywide conversation and implementation of ordinances and policies that work for the city. So I do ask you to, do your research. When it comes to this election, none of us have experience, in this race because none of us were mayor. A lot of us have leadership qualities and characteristics, but we have to really look at community. We need someone to be community involved. We need someone who truly listen, so that we don't continue that same cycle of, silence, that has been, hovering around Richmond, for so long. So I ask you to, vote for your voice, vote to make sure that we have an opportunity for the future, and vote for the next business that's going to come in the city so we can hold on to it. Vote for the next family that wants to move to the city that they can afford a home. So I do appreciate the opportunity. And we also, I know we got to run, but you can have this as an open discussion if you like as well for anything that you may want to bring up, of question or concern. Don't leave here with any reservation. Don't leave here with saying, I should have asked him this question or I want to know if he knew this, or whatever it may be, because we have to break and bridge the gap. We break the barriers and bridge the gap. So,
All right. Well, thank you everyone for
thank
coming.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.